In 2019, PHILZA accidentally started the hardcore trend, but the golden age of Minecraft hardcore is over. Don't worry though, there's a new trend on the horizon. I believe soon millions of people are gonna be fascinated by Superflat instead of hardcore let's plays. And also, here's why Mogswamp is a genius. When it started, Minecraft was a fresh and interesting concept and people loved it. It was like Lego, but basically without limitations. And even though there's an infinite amount of content, people will still get bored of it at some point. And they did. Hardcore was partly so popular because it added a new challenge to the game and it always felt exciting. And that for people playing and people watching. In reality, everyone could have just used mods, and with the degree of customizability Minecraft has and the amount of mods there are for it, most people would have probably found a challenge that fitted better for them personally. But the reason why hardcore got so popular is its accessibility. Most people wouldn't bother to go through the trouble of installing a mod client, finding a mod they like, and downloading it into their mods folder. Hardcore was an option that could be turned on with one click, and it was also handy for creators because everyone watching understood the concept. All of this also applies to Superflat. It's a fresh experience, easily understandable and accessible. But in one big point, it's even better. Superflat also exists in Bedrock, even if there aren't any structures yet. And more than half of Minecraft's player base plays on Bedrock, so the potential audience for content creators is more than twice as big. Secondly, Superflat is great for starting a let's play. Personally, I feel like the start of most conventional single player let's plays is a bit boring, because everyone always does the same stuff. But to get all your stuff in Superflat, you need to use tons of complicated, innovative ways and mostly unknown game mechanics, which makes everything much more interesting for the viewers. And that doesn't just apply to the start. You could easily fill 50 episodes just with building the various farms you need to get all of your resources in Superflat. And if you wanna know more about that, feel free to check out my second channel or TikTok linked in the description. And now, just to prove my let's play point, I'm gonna start a Superflat world in this video. After making a Superflat world in 1.18 and rejoining in 1.19.2 in order to get all the structures, I cranked up my render distance and ran towards a village. I went on to get set up with my first tools, grab a bed and loot all the chests. But then, you settle down here. Yeah, dying is not a good idea. I am not gonna die. Ooh. Anyway, I then killed the iron golem before finding out which were the slime chunks around my village with the help of chunk base and my seed and puffing them all up so that now slimes couldn't spawn there anymore while simultaneously getting geared up. But before I was finished, I'd nearly run out of proper food and I decided to try and loot some other villages. But I quickly realized that they contain next to no hay bales in Superflat. And so I just grabbed all the plants and seeds I could get, ran back home and started planting them myself. The most intelligent way to do that was to take one slime chunk and make him into a farm instead of puffing him up, which would spawn proof him and make him useful. And then, while waiting for my crops to grow, I destroyed some of the wood in my village and I started building a wall around my new slime-free area so that intruders didn't have a chance to kill me anymore. But while doing that, something happened. See, there's one thing about this Superflat world I haven't told you about yet. It is a challenge that gets harder and harder the longer I play here, because after every hour I have to spin a fortune wheel that will punish me with anything from having to play in F1 constantly to not being allowed to wear any armor anymore. As I was building my wall, the first hour passed and I had to get my first challenge. And the next reason for why Superflat is so good is that it's highly customizable. But in this case, I'm not talking about mods, but I'm talking about the ability to change the blocks your world is made of. This allows for nearly infinite amounts of custom long-term Superflat worlds or one-off challenges that can, compared to other challenges YouTubers do, be repeated by the audience without needing any mods or datapacks. Although you can of course also do challenges like the one I'm in now. And yes, so I wasn't allowed to sprint anymore. A little annoying, but nothing compared to how difficult it would be with several other harder challenges, as I'd find out later. So after deleting my sprint button, I finished ripping all of the oak logs out of my village and turning them into part of a wall. But after just a few minutes, there was no wood left on the houses, but my wall was also nowhere close to being finished. With that, I was forced to take down the few trees that were standing around, and plant new ones with the saplings, thus starting my manual little wood farm. I was now starting to make some progress, because while waiting for my trees and fields to grow, I trapped some of the villagers in a hole in the ground to be used later, built the cobblestone generator with the lava from a ruined portal in my village, nearly burned to death again, and started removing the ugly, already half destroyed villager houses. And as I was so busy, the second hour passed in the blink of an eye, and I had to fear a new challenge. Spin. Next up are the things that the average player can't do in a normal world, but can do in Superflat, and the satisfaction you get from building decorative stuff. There's one thing that's very easy to make in Superflat, and that are mob farms. Instead of having to make a perimeter, you can easily build insanely efficient overworld farms just by placing some water. And I also feel like it's just even more satisfying to complete, make, or see a big decorative build in Superflat, because it looks so impressive surrounded by all the flat area, and knowing that everything you see that's not, well, super flat is handcrafted. Spin. This was literally the luckiest I could have ever gotten, but there was still a problem. I was gonna build my house next, and I knew that I had to finish some other stuff before that, and that I'd never be able to finish everything in an hour. So I decided to spin for the second hour I'd have to spend as well. Auto jump on. That was also not too bad. I continued farming trees, destroying the village and building the wall around my place. But after that was done and the next hour that I'd already rolled my challenge for was over, I started to feel that this was too easy. And so I spun another time. There it was. Finally something actually challenging. Because what that means is that every time I want to place, block with my shield or eat, I end up hitting or breaking. And I'm way too used to the Minecraft controls to be able to easily adapt to switching the two most important mouse buttons. Oh, and I also had to put sneak on toggle. And with this new challenge, I started gathering some resources to use in my house before going into a creative test world and designing it. This was quite a challenge, as I basically only had access to oak, wood and stone. And considering that, it turned out quite well. But while trying to construct it in the actual flat world, another hour passed, and I had to get the challenge once again. And plain F1 now that I'm building. Okay, it's starting to get hard. And not seeing my crosshair or my inventory was really annoying when trying to build a house. But I eventually managed to pull it off, and while I was at it, I also decorated the wall to look at least decent. So here's what we started out with, and this is what we've transformed it into the matter of about 5 hours. But then something awful happened. Wait, I need to interrupt, because there's now a way to financially support me and my future Minecraft and YouTube projects via the Koji link in the description, and 100% of the money you donate will go directly to me. But then something awful happened. A zombie had fallen into the pit where my villagers were trapped, and I heard them being transformed to zombie villagers. So to stop this, I jumped in as well. The problem is, I was now in a pit with several zombie villagers and I didn't see my health, because I had to be in F1. So I died and died and died and died and died 23 times. Eventually I escaped. But what I haven't told you yet is that I wanted to give myself a new challenge every time I died. But 23 challenges from the same situation didn't seem reasonable at the time. So I spun the fortune wheel 7 times. Another reason for why Superflat is particularly interesting in the new versions is that a lot more is possible in them. You can now beat the game, build renewable raid farms and find tons of new structures in Superflat. And this might get even better in the future, because if Superflat gets more and more popular as a main game mode, chances are Mojang might even try to actively put other Superflat friendly ways of getting certain items into the game. And now that it was so hard for me to do basically anything, I left my safe little fortress and went on a journey to find some of the structures I talked about. There was the ruined portal, a structure I'd already used, but that was only added to Superflat very recently. There was also the outpost, which also hasn't been in Superflat for long, and which now gives you the option to easily build raid farms in Superflat. Something extremely important, as trading is one of the easiest and most important ways of accessing many items. And last, but definitely not least, there's the stronghold, the third recent structure addition, and something something that grants you access to a whole new dimension with an end boss and some of the most important items that exist in the game. But those were all the structures in the overworld, and so I entered the Nether. I spawned into a warped forest and started to kill some endermen to later beat the game while looking for structures. And after getting myself a few ender pearls, I randomly discovered a nether fortress and tried killing a place despite all my challenges. And after awkwardly trying to not get shot for some time, this happened. I'm dead. Yes, I'm dead. And now, what might be the most important factor in terms of content creation and consumption, and another advantage of Superflat over Hardcore. Superflat is extremely SMP friendly. Where Hardcore is certainly a fun element for things like the Last Life series, it destroys the possibility of severe fun and chaos without permanently losing members for things more similar to Hermitcraft, Empire's SMP or Lifesteal SMP. Superflat, on the other hand, is an understandable and accessible challenge that doesn't have these problems. In fact, I'd argue it's even better for multiplayer, because the fact that resources are so hard to get means that the economy and shopping districts will flourish. And by the way, I myself am gonna play on a Superflat SMP with 5 other people, and I'll upload my first episode about it on the 26th of August. Back at home, I respawned in the same hole that had killed me 23 times before and got killed a bunch more times. And then, as Superflat is so fun to play together, I invited my friend SlimeGod, also a future member of our Superflat SMP, to come and help me gear up and finally beat the game in this world. The good thing is, while I was majorly handicapped, he could just play the game as usual. So, as he was running towards my base, I spun the fortune wheel 3 times for my new challenges.
Oh, no.
So after setting myself to 5 hearts, he went back to the Nether, where I tried safely killing Enderman, while he attempted to get some blaze rods. But all of this didn't go as expected, and in the end we both died and weren't allowed to loot anything anymore, and he also wasn't allowed to run backwards. But eventually we were done collecting everything we needed. Another 2 hours were over, but I had forgotten to give myself a challenge after the first one, and so I now rolled our hopefully last ones, and we were lucky enough to get stuff we'd already rolled before. So next up, we made our way to the stronghold. So to conclude, I wanna say that there's one advantage of Hardcore over Superflat, and that is the constant danger you're in. Something particularly important for live streams, as it gives viewers an extra reason to watch the most dull of tasks, but less important for videos, as you tend to just cut out boring parts. But you shouldn't try predicting the future, so I'm gonna do it anyway and say that I think in 1 year Mogswamp is gonna have over 1 million subscribers and Superflat is gonna be as popular as Hardcore is now. We tried running towards the stronghold, but as I wasn't allowed to sleep, we were constantly attacked by mobs, died more than once on the way, and SlimeGod had to switch his mouse buttons too. But in the end, we managed to get there, and everything just got worse. As I'd at this point got nearly all the challenges possible, and I wasn't even able to access my normal inventory anymore without looking into a crafting table, the plan was for Slime to build up to all the end crystal and shoot them first try with the few arrows he had, while I was placing water for him to jump down safely. In practice, this worked for about half the pillars before we both started dying several times in the process of desperately trying to do our job, and we got more and more handicapped. But we nonetheless managed to eventually destroy all the crystals, and from there on out we waited for the dragon to come down to the middle, where we'd hit him. But we got killed by Dragon's Breath, Enderman or other stuff several times. And after what felt like ages, he finally told me that the dragon was really low on health, as I myself couldn't see that anymore, being on F1 constantly. But before we were able to finish him off, we both died again, him getting punished to also use F1, so that it was now impossible to know for us how much health the dragon had left. And then, after we'd entered the end again, the dragon purged, and I went there, waited for him, and exploded the bed, thus sacrificing my life in order to finally complete this challenge. And if you don't wanna wait for the first episode of Superflat SMP, here you can watch the entire 1380 days journey of my hardcore world, where, other than here, I didn't die a lot.